Hi, welcome. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to my next Facebook Live. For, again, people who don't know me, I am Dr. Natasha Williams, clinical psychologist, keynote speaker, and published author. Thank you so much for joining me today. So as usual, this week is going to be another hot topic. So we're going to be talking about healthy relationships. Now, what's interesting is that I don't only want to talk about relationships between yourself and another person. We also need to talk about the relationship with yourself, because your relationship with somebody else will only be stronger once you have a solid foundation and that the relationship with yourself is solid. So we're going to be vacillating between the two, but my hope is that we don't confuse, but we understand how this has a synergistic effect. So how there's a synergy between the healthy relationship with yourself and as such a healthy relationship with others. Now, how do you know that you are possibly not in a healthy relationship? Now, for instance, a lot of times what you will notice is that you feel lethargic. You find that energy is being sucked out of you, that regardless of being in the relationship, you're not being energized by the relationship. And that ends up being a huge issue. What happens in a healthy relationship is what we call reciprocity. So there's a reciprocal effect in a relationship. So you're not always giving 100% and not receiving anything in return. There has to be a reciprocity. So you're giving of yourself, but you also realize that your partner is giving to you. A lot of times what happens is that ends up becoming misbalanced, if you want to call it that. Whereas a lot of times you find that maybe there's one partner that is giving more towards the other partner, supporting their goals and dreams. And what happens is that you're not being energized as well in the same aspect. So what happens? Just like a car that can't run when there's no gas in it, you are not being refueled. And that ends up being a very huge issue, which can then cause a deterioration in your relationship if it is continuous. Hi, Juliet. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm not saying that it's going to be give and take always equally all the time. There are going to be some instances where, for example, your partner may need you more, and you're going to be a pillar of support for your partner. So in that season, it may be important that you are there for them during their period. But you also have to understand that you have to refuel yourself. If you are constantly giving and you notice that you are not being satisfied in whatever aspect of your life, then you'll notice that the relationship is going to start to deteriorate. And that ends up being a huge issue in terms of sustaining. It doesn't mean that we can't get the relationship back to balance, but it means that that imbalance is starting to erode the relationship. Now, within that erosion of the relationship between the two, a lot of times that then also translates into a deterioration within self-doubt, lack of awareness, reduced self-esteem. And what ends up happening is that you start to question yourself, who you are, what you believe your worth is. So on top of all that, you notice that a lot of times with the deterioration in a relationship, more that you stay there, you'll also notice a deterioration in your personal relationship as well. So when those two things are not in balance, unfortunately, you become unhealthy. Hi, Afua, thank you so much for joining. You become unhealthy. And then that is when, hi Najee, thank you for joining as well. What you'll also notice is that your health becomes compromised. If you are now lacking self-esteem, your self-image is now being compromised. What happens is that you don't engage in the behaviors that you would typically do to maintain your health or to keep yourself healthy. So for example, if you are not feeling your best, if self-esteem ends up being an issue, what ends up happening is that self-care strategies, and I talked about that in a previous live, self-care ends up being an issue. You don't take care of yourself as good as you should, which means, for example, maybe you're not eating as healthy as you should. So a lot of times, they have the saying, junk in, junk out. Now, here's the thing. That can also translate to the relationship you have with yourself. If you are now really consuming unhealthy food, junk, it really does a number on the body. And what happens is that not only physically does that manifest in terms of difficulty with skin, digestive issues, all of these kinds of things. What ends up happening is that emotionally you continue to deteriorate, because if I don't feel that I am worthy, then why should I even take care of myself? Why should I even need to go to the gym and exercise or even just become active? If I don't have that sense of worth for myself, I'm not going to engage in those behaviors as readily as somebody who is taking care of themselves and who is, making themselves a priority and making sure that they are healthy as possible. So having a healthy sense of self then translates within a relationship as well. So if your self-esteem, self-worth, those type of issues are a factor, that becomes also draining to a potential partner as well. Because then a lot of times what we end up doing is we try to find our efficacy in outside sources. So instead of having that self-efficacy or being able to find your worth within, you always look for external sources to make you feel better. And unfortunately, if you do that within a relationship, that ends up creating a very unhealthy balance as well, because you are dependent on that other person to fuel your self-esteem. If that person leaves, your self-esteem then goes with them. Your self-worth also goes with them as well, until you find somebody else to attach to. And then unfortunately, your then self-worth is then attached to that person as well. So what's very important to understand is that we have to understand the power within. How do we then understand how we take care of ourselves, how we start to worry about the negative self-chatter and self-talk, and be able to appreciate the being that we are. Every person is unique. Every individual has their own purpose. Once we again tap into that and understand that each person has a unique purpose, then from there we can almost start that journey into how do we then understand what our purpose is, but more importantly, how do we become the best version of ourselves? I will say this, a lot of times the comparative spirit can be a relationship killer. What do I mean by that? If we talk about relationships with other people, sometimes we're in a relationship with somebody, and again, that is your own unique relationship, unique perspective. And what happens is that we then start comparing ourselves to other couples. We may, maybe we just got married, we don't have children yet. People are then asking, when are you going to have kids? Then you start to compare. Well, all of my friends have had their children. How come I don't? And then what happens is that negativity starts to spew into your relationship, versus everyone has a unique relationship. Everyone has a certain time when things are to manifest. If we stop with the comparative spirit, you then fuel all of that energy into your own relationship and to curate it the way that it needs to be without worrying about other people, what they have, what they don't have. A lot of times that comparative spirit as well looks like material things. I have a certain house, or we're living in an apartment, but my friend has a house. Why don't we have a house yet? This person drives this sort of car. How come we don't have that? So what happens is that as human beings, we're always comparing one with another. And unfortunately, what can happen in a relationship is that comparative spirit begins to erode what you have. Now, if we talk about this from an individual perspective, that comparative spirit can also be a personal relationship killer as well. You look at somebody else, you see what they have, and a lot of times you desire, but almost to a fault, what they have. That person is a size 2. I'm a size 12. I wish I was a size 2 because I would be prettier if I was skinny. So what happens is that comparative spirit starts to fuel the negative self-talk. And the more that you talk negatively about yourself is the more that you erode yourself. So just like, if you have a rock, and if that rock has a stream of water that continuously flows on the same spot on the rock, what happens is that rock will start to erode. So the more negativity that you end up not only ascribing to, but believing, the more that you erode and the more that you become unhealthy because you cannot appreciate the person that you are. Now, I will say this is not an easy road because comparison is everywhere. I remember with myself, I will give you an example. I have struggled with my weight for a long period of time. I've been up and down. I've been as small as a size 6. I've been as large as a size 16. But what I was doing, unfortunately, is that I had this mindset that to be absolutely beautiful and perfect, I had to be absolutely skinny, to the point where I would then implore negative behavioral strategies to try to attain that perception of beauty that I had, which means the crash diets, the exercising 6-7 days a week, running, and just doing things that, on the surface you may think are healthy, but they're done in an unhealthy manner and they're actually meeting a goal that shouldn't be met. What I had to look at going forward is understanding in my mindset what message was being sent to me about being skinny. And I really figured out early on, especially in my childhood, that growing up, being skinny was seen as such a mark of beauty. And you had to do whatever you could to be that skinny person. If you were overweight, then something had to be done. If it was tuck in something here, suck in your gut here. So there was never this sense of being appreciative of the person you are at this point. Now, mind you, I'm in a space now where I'm happy with the size that I am. I know genetics play a role, but I also realize that I love myself enough to make sure that I eat as healthy as I can. I make sure I'm very mindful of what I put in my body. I also move. I do go to the gym. I have a trainer, those types of things, but that's what works for me. Being active actually helps me not only physically in terms of not only just, and for me, physical activity is not about weight loss. Physical activity is about being healthy and presenting my best self wherever I go, which means what it does for me as well is it provides me with mental clarity, and it also helps me spiritually, so that I'm in tune with myself. So there's not this end product of I have to be a size 2. And listen, genetically, I am never going to be a size 2. I'm just putting it out there. But I am a healthier version of myself now than I was even just maybe 2 years ago. And I also know that it's a journey. Every day that God gives me breath and life, I want to make sure that I do what I can to be as healthy as possible. But this did not happen overnight. This was something that I had to take time to really figure out and to sit back and understand that I had a negative relationship, not only with somebody else. I was in an unhealthy relationship, but I also had a negative relationship with myself. And I had to understand and navigate those two things, because it could have been very simple to say that it was my ex-husband and that's the reason why my relationship was so unhealthy. I also had to turn that mirror around and look at myself. What was I allowing? And also, was there a part of me that did not appreciate myself enough to make sure that I had everything that I needed to be healthy? So that's also very important. And this is why I mentioned at the beginning of this video that there is a synergistic effect with the relationship with yourself as well as the relationship with other people. So what I want to do is, in the last few minutes of this live, I'd like to provide you with just a few tips in terms of curating a healthy relationship with others, as well as a healthy relationship with yourself. Now, here's the thing. I'm not only talking about romantic relationships, intimate partner relationships. I'm also talking about your friendships. You have to be mindful of the people that are around you as well, because if those are also toxic, it creates a toxic environment around yourself as well. And eventually, if that toxicity is always there, it will seep inside of you. So you have to also have enough self-awareness to understand what is around you as well, and that understand that you are the curator of your space. You are responsible for who is around you, the energy that is around you, and if that energy is not serving you, or it is contributing to any toxicity, you have every right to move that energy away, move that individual away. The other thing is that there are people that could be in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And a lot of times what we do is the person that should be in your life for a season, we try to force them as a lifetime relationship. So people change, seasons change, and you always have to be mindful of what is going on around you at all times. I'm not saying that you do this just once, purge, and then everything is fine. You always have to go back. See who's around you. See what energy is around you. And as you learn and grow, and a lot of times as you change, your circle of friends will change as well, because they do not feel comfortable with the new you. As you change and you grow, those people, you don't serve them any longer. They don't belong in your space. So it's important to actually say, listen, if this doesn't serve me any longer, it's okay that you're leaving my life, because you've served your purpose at the place where I was at, but now you no longer serve that purpose. So, and to not think that that is a slight against you or that there's something wrong with you. As you are learning and growing, your circle of friends or your relationships around you will also be subject to change, and to be mindful of that as well. So let me give you a few tips in terms of starting with a relationship with yourself. A relationship with others, and how you can look out for that and be able to start to curate some of that. So the first thing, as I mentioned before, is you need to love yourself. Be comfortable with who you are means you will be a happier partner. If you are not happy with yourself, you are then thinking that your partner has to be the key to your happiness. And that person is never going to be the key to your own happiness and self-worth. They may contribute to it, but if they're the primary reason for your happiness and you have no inner happiness for yourself, or you do not love yourself, then that is actually going to contribute to an unhealthy relationship. Two healthy individuals create a healthy relationship. Sometimes you have to, again, one may have to edify the other, but that's what we are as human beings. Remember, the permission to be human, as one of my other lives, means that you're not going to be perfect all the time. And what's going to happen is that, there may be times where you wax and wane and that kind of thing, but there's still an understanding about loving yourself in the midst of all of that. So that's absolutely not a problem. The second thing in a healthy relationship with somebody else is to communicate. We hear this all the time, but it's not that easy to do, because the thing is that a lot of times as you are getting comfortable in a relationship, sometimes there's assumptions that people read minds. And I mean, it sounds a little funny to say, but a lot of times I shouldn't say what I'm feeling because they should already know who I am. Or sometimes what we do, if we're curating a new relationship, we bring baggage from our old relationship. So if we had someone who was not a communicator, who made a lot of assumptions, who either was quite selfish, or when you tried to communicate with them, you were met with a lot of negativity. If you don't aim to clear that up, you then bring that into your next relationship, and then there's a significant deterioration in communication. So open communication is going to be effective. Now, there's a difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness, and I'm not saying that you need to be aggressive, that you need to be hurtful when you communicate, but what's going to be important is that you express yourself in a fair and equitable way without feeling that you need to be challenged to communicate or to say whatever it is that's on your mind for fear of reprimand or whatever the case may be. If the healthier your relationship, the more that you understand that being able to openly say what it is that you feel will actually be able to curate a healthier relationship versus bottling everything in and making a lot of assumptions. Which then goes to the next point: be honest. Dishonesty is the absolute killer of relationships, because once honesty is gone, if I cannot trust you and you're not honest with me, how could then I have a healthy relationship with you? Because I don't know where you're coming from or what you're doing, or just to be honest, understanding that sometimes honesty may hurt, but again, if you are communicating in a loving manner or in an assertive manner, you're not going out there deliberately to hurt somebody. But you want to make sure that you are honest with that individual as well. The next thing is to give each other space. Remember, I mentioned two healthy individuals actually create a healthier relationship. If you are not giving space to that individual, or not, you're suffocating them, you're not allowing them the opportunity to curate their own other relationships or friendships outside of your own, that you think you have to monopolize their time entirely, that is going to then curate a spirit in that relationship that is going to be detrimental. So it's going to be very important that you give each other space, so that as you grow in as stronger individuals, you have a stronger relationship. Agree to disagree. Just because I'm in a relationship with you does not mean that I have to agree with you at all times, but be respectful. I may disagree with you, but it doesn't mean that I have to disrespect you. And that, to me, is the difference. I'll agree to disagree. We may not have the same opinion all the time, but I won't be disrespectful. Forgive and ask for forgiveness. Because again, no one is perfect. Some of the flaws that you have in a relationship, they've got flaws as well. And what you may also want to look at is, Just as you forgive, you need to make sure that, you forgive others as well as they have the space to forgive you. Hey, Princess Rhonda, thank you for joining. So you have to make sure that you not only accept forgiveness, but you are able to forgive. Because when you make a mistake, and you will, you want to make sure that there's a space provided for not only just sorry, but for forgiveness as well. And the last thing in terms of your building a healthy relationship with somebody else is to support each other. It's not good enough to always support your partner's dreams, aspirations, goals, and then turn around and you're not being supported at all. That I talked about earlier is that lack of reciprocity, which means you're now being drained of all of your resources as you're supporting your partner, but unfortunately, you're not being fueled by your partner as well. That is then going to create an imbalance as well as an unhealthy relationship. So what I want to do now is then now talk about a couple of tips that you may find helpful in terms of the relationship with yourself. That's also important as well. The first thing is going to be recognize negative self-talk. One of the most important things. Everyone has a voice inside their head that guides their decisions. And the more negative that it is, the more that you beat yourself up, the more that you talk negatively about yourself, is the more that you're going to have an unhealthy relationship with yourself. You cannot be healthy and then turn around and punish yourself at every instance. So that helps me get to the next, actually 2 points, which is get to know yourself. What do you love? Who are you as an individual? What do you enjoy? And be able to feed that to yourself. No compromise. Just because somebody else doesn't like it doesn't mean that it's not important to you. So get to know who you are as an individual. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What do you enjoy doing? These are things that the more you get to know yourself, the more that you will not compromise if somebody comes and tries to talk negatively about you as well, because you're strengthening your own self. So there's certain things that you will not tolerate from other people. Sometimes this lesson is not the easiest thing to learn, but at the end of the day, my hope is that when you start to understand some of these tips, you'll then notice that you will become healthier and healthier and healthier. And then again, you will then create a space for somebody to enter, friendship, intimate relationship, that doesn't matter. But what happens is that the person that also is in your space ends up being a positive energy force within that space. And you will not tolerate negativity, or you will not tolerate anybody who is against you, against your space. The other thing you want to do is show compassion to yourself. Love yourself. Again, easier said than done, because I'm pretty certain any one of us can look in the mirror and start talking about what flaws we have. A lot of times it's bodily flaws, or, my eyes look like this, my nose is too big, my lips are. So we can sit here and just literally tear ourselves apart. But if we show compassion to ourselves, understand and love the person that God has created us to be, then once we're able to have that self-compassion, it makes it very easy for somebody else to love you as well. So that's also very important. Stop judging others. And that means also that comparative spirit, as I mentioned before. You are looking at what other people have, what other people are doing. And it's also, and here's the thing, it's good to elevate yourself. It's good to, be able to want more for yourself, desire great things. But when you are starting to judge, become critical of yourself, being critical of others, and comparing yourself to others, and using that comparative spirit to beat up yourself, that's where we're going wrong. And then that's where, unfortunately, we end up unhealthy. So one of the last things I'll tell you, a last tip will be, spend some time alone. If you have difficulty being alone, on your own, then that curates a spirit of loneliness. There's a difference between being alone and lonely. If you have to be in the company of others at all times and you feel uncomfortable being on your own, that's also something that has to be questioned. If you're able to build that healthy relationship with yourself and understanding that alone time is actually refueling yourself, then you will then be a more powerful person within the dynamic of any kind of friendship or relationship. Because again, you don't have to depend on other people. And that for me, I think is one of the most important things. Now, when I say dependency, I'm talking about having a person in your life, which means that you cannot be independent. You cannot be without that person to the point where it's almost like you can't breathe without this person. I'm saying that yes, in time in a relationship that two become one, or you're able to really look at how we work with each other. But again, to be healthy, you have to understand who you are as an individual and what you need internally to strengthen yourself. So spending some time alone, and in whatever fashion. For me, prayer and meditation is the most important for me. It allows me to refuel, but it also allows me that time to sit with myself and to understand, what my thoughts are. Sometimes I'll analyze my thoughts and try to figure out where they're coming from. Or more importantly, just sit and be. And that for me refuels myself and allows me to take that next step the next day. Life is a journey. And we have to understand that in that journey, we've got days and moments and seasons. And I want to make sure that I take one step at a time on that road. So my hope is that today, this live was helpful for you to understand a healthy relationship with others, as well as a healthy relationship with yourself. Now, for anybody who is interested and hasn't done so yet, on my website, www.drnatashawilliams.com, there is a link for a worksheet. It's a free worksheet. And what that worksheet does, it allows you to start your journey in terms of being able to start to curate a healthy relationship with yourself. It's not a cure-all, but what it does is starts to ask you a few questions about yourself that may start to spark some interest in trying to really figure out yourself. So I invite you to go onto my webpage and to click on the link and download that free worksheet for yourself. So again, take care, have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.